The Freedom Junkies presents Breaking Free. I'm Ems Rickson, and this is Breaking Free, the podcast where I talk honestly about addiction, how it has affected me, and the things I do to break free, in the hope it will help others who want to do the same.
Today's episode is going to be kind of a little bit of a book review, really. I've just recently read this amazing book called Lost Connections by Johann Hari. He's a really well-known journalist, and he actually did a TED Talk that I've written a blog post about before to do with addiction and connection. In the talk, which is called Everything You Think You Know About Addiction Is Wrong, he says that the opposite of addiction is connection. And this book that he's written, Lost Connections, is taking a closer look at connection and depression. So it's about the causes of depression. And he, as someone who took antidepressants for a really long time, has had a look into what the real causes of depression are. We've had this model for so long that's been given to us by doctors and by drug companies that depression is caused by a chemical imbalance in your brain. I think this is really left over from the kind of idea from a long time ago that, you know, the body is like a machine. It can be broken down into little pieces. You just have to go in and tinker with something, and anything that's wrong with it is sort of been equated to like a car or a machine breaking down. But from doing extensive research, looking into a lot of other people's extensive research, Johann Hari has sort of discovered that depression has social and psychological causes as well as biological causes, and actually that the biological causes really only kick in and come into play if there are social and psychological causes that will exacerbate them. And you can actually make huge changes and affect the depression without antidepressants and medication. For example, one of the things that he talks about in his book is called the Hamilton scale, which is the scale that psychiatrists use to measure depression. And it's a scale from 0, which is skipping along, happy as Larry, to 51, which is extreme depression. And what research has shown is that, for example, you can make a 6-point leap on the Hamilton scale simply by improving your sleeping patterns. In contrast, antidepressants have been shown to give about a 1.8 point jump on the scale. So already you can see that doing quite simple things like adjusting the way you sleep can have a much greater effect on depression than the thing that we've been told is the main cure for this problem. It's obviously also a really big problem. You know, so many people suffer from depression, but this book is also relevant for people who aren't depressed or haven't been officially diagnosed with depression. He acknowledges that depression and unhappiness, they're not the same thing, but he's realized through his research that they exist on a spectrum. So in his book, he says, depression and anxiety are only the sharpest edges of a spear that has been thrust into almost everyone in our culture. And that quote really struck me, because even if you can say that you're not clinically depressed, that you haven't been officially diagnosed with depression, you're not on antidepressants or anything like that, I think that everyone can identify with feeling unhappy at certain points in their life. And so much of what he has to say in the book is really relevant to people who have experienced any kind of unhappiness. Also, I feel like so much of it is relevant to people with addiction issues or with substance abuse issues. At the end of the day, we use substances to numb our pain, to mask unhappiness, basically. And so when I was reading the book, I really did feel like you could substitute addiction or substance abuse for depression, and so much of what he was saying made sense and would help a lot of people. So the book is broken into 2 different parts. The first one is the causes of depression, or areas in our life where we've become disconnected. And the second is looking at the solutions to these problems, or areas where we can increase connections in our lives. And when I was reading the book, the first half talking about the causes of depression, I was thinking about times in my life when I felt either deeply unhappy or actually would consider myself to have been feeling depressed. They often coincided, when I think about it, with sort of the heaviest substance use. So when I was drinking really, really heavily, or more recently when I was smoking really, really heavily, they coincided with times in my life where I was feeling really, really down. And I suppose that's because I was using either drink or smoking weed to mask the pain that I was in and how sad I was. So, you know, when I was drinking a lot, it was when I was working in a job that I hated, living in London in a life that just didn't feel like I belonged in it at all. And I was just deeply, deeply unhappy. I really wanted to go traveling, but I felt very trapped in the life that I had. And, you know, it really took quite a lot to burst out of that life and go traveling and try and find the thing that I wanted to do. More recently, when the cafe that I was running with my partner and friends in Brighton closed down, I really felt like I had failed. I felt like a failure. I felt like I hadn't tried hard enough. And I was also living in the place where the cafe was, felt like I was sort of living in the grave of a business that I had really wanted to succeed. And I was feeling really depressed. I was struggling to get out of bed. I was, you know, arguing a lot with Ryan. I was really low and I was smoking a lot. And so I feel like I can identify, when I look at those areas or those times in my life, I can identify a lot of the disconnections, which were the causes that Johann Hari is talking about, being present at these times. Some of the disconnections that he says cause depression are disconnection from meaningful work, disconnection from meaningful values, from other people, disconnection from nature, disconnection from status and respect, disconnection from a hopeful or secure future. So many of these things I feel like people can identify with either one or some or maybe even all of the reasons why we feel depressed. Conversely, when I was reading the section that was about connections, these solutions to depression and things that we can do to help improve things, I was thinking about the happiest times in my life. So, for example, the first year that I was teaching scuba diving, or the year that I spent in Canada, or even just this last year that I've had where I've been sober, where I've been living in our van and traveling and exploring. I can see that I was reconnecting to a lot of the things that Johann Hari is talking about in the book. So I can see that I was connecting more with people, connecting with nature. I had some meaningful work. I was connecting with society by sort of volunteering. I was developing more meaningful values. I felt like I had connection to a future, to goals that I was working towards. And the times where I've had the most connections are the times that I would consider to be my most happy and secure. Now, obviously, you know, mental health, depression, dealing with unhappiness, it's a work in progress for sure. There are definitely times where I still feel unhappy. There are definitely reasons that I still struggle. One of them is loneliness. I often feel very lonely. I feel like the lifestyle that I've had, years of traveling, never spending very long in one place, always moving around and not having the time to really form strong connections that then survive kind of long distance relationships with a lot of the people that I've met, mean that I feel like I don't have a strong kind of core group of friends to talk to when I need someone to talk to. It's often quite hard for me. You know, my best friend lives in Australia. It's not always easy for me to be able to talk to her on a regular basis, especially living in the van when we don't have internet. So I often feel quite disconnected from people. Perhaps that's why I really enjoyed working in the cafe I worked in Berlin, because I felt like I really was able to connect with a lot of people. The customers were very friendly. I met lots of really great people there. I loved the people that I worked with. And having that job in that particular place gave me a bit of a sense of community and connection with people. But now we're back in the UK, we're sort of moving around a lot. I definitely feel lonely a lot of the time whilst traveling in the van. The other thing that I struggle with, and it's something that I mentioned in the previous podcast episode that I made, I struggle a lot with self-compassion, or with a lack of self-compassion. I'm often very hard on myself. I beat myself up a lot. I definitely feel like that's an area that I could work on that would really help me with any feelings of kind of depression and anxiety that I sometimes feel I suffer with. One of the connections that Johann Hari talks about is sympathetic joy, and how connecting with compassion to other people can really help you overcome depression. And one of the things that he talks about, somebody who he knows, the story that he uses as an example, is a woman who starts practicing a loving kindness meditation, which is a Buddhist meditation. I've done it a few times actually at kind of Buddhist meditation centers. And it's basically a meditation where you think of, first of all, of yourself, and you send yourself thoughts of joy and wishes of happiness and kindness and compassion. And then you think of other people. So you think of someone that you like, you think of someone that you're indifferent to, you think of someone that you struggle with, that you perhaps don't like or you don't get on well with. And then you send these thoughts out to the whole world. And the idea is that you're working on compassion for yourself, but also on compassion and kindness for other people. This is something that I'm going to try and work on. I've downloaded, obviously, podcast episodes that have like a guided loving kindness meditation. So it's something I'm going to try and like work into my meditation. One of the things that we're striving towards at the moment is to find community, to go volunteer at communities, or to start a community to help kind of boost that sense of connection with people, and trying to keep in touch with old friends, really make sure that I am better at messaging people. I definitely tend to be a little bit slack with that. And obviously, you know, it isn't easy when you don't have constant access to the internet, and that's the way everyone communicates these days. But to definitely try and make more of an effort to stay connected to people that I meet, friends that I make on the way around while we travel, and the friends that I have already. One final thing I wanted to talk about with this book, Lost Connections, was something that I feel is really important, but just doesn't really get talked about that much when it comes to depression, anxiety, mental health issues in general. At the beginning of the book, Hari talks about when he was in Vietnam and he got food poisoning from an apple, and he is violently ill. He nearly almost dies. And he's at the hospital, and he wants something to help with his vomiting and his nausea because it's pretty out of control. And the doctor tells him, no, you need your nausea. It's telling you something. It's a message, and we need to listen to it and understand what it's trying to tell us. At the end of the book, Johann Hari says that this story was with him the whole way he was doing his research, and he realized what that story was telling him was that depression and anxiety, they are a form of pain. Pain is unpleasant, and we don't like experiencing it. But the thing is, we need it. We need our pain. This pain is a message, and it's telling us something. And what it's telling us is that there's something wrong with the way that we live. The thing that I really liked about this book that made it different for me from so many other things is that it doesn't make depression the problem of the individual. Yes, there are some issues that people have, and yes, there are some things that people can do on an individual level to help improve things. But one of the biggest things that he talks about is how depression is a collective problem. And so the solutions on the whole need to be collective as well. We need to change the culture that is causing so many people to be depressed. He says, you aren't a machine with broken parts. You are an animal whose needs are not being met. You are not suffering a chemical imbalance in your brain. You are suffering from a social and spiritual imbalance in how we live. Essentially, what he's saying is that depression is a reaction to the way that we are living. We have to listen to this reaction, and we need to find the true causes and treat those, not the symptoms, by dulling the pain and medicating the people who are most in need of help. this is something that really strikes me with like addiction. I think so much of what we're doing with addiction is using substances to numb pain. We're not treating the causes or the reasons why we're unhappy. We're just trying to get rid of that pain, and we're just not listening to the messages that it's telling us. A lot of the solutions in the book, as I was reading through, just felt so much like big changes that need to be made in our culture and our society that could have a really powerful impact on people suffering from depression. So I guess just a short episode today. Really, I just wanted to talk about how much I loved this book, but I didn't want to give too much away and essentially just kind of read it all out to you. What I recommend is going out and buying it, reading it, giving it to your friends. For me, it was the kind of book that I read it, and pretty much as soon as it was finished, I wanted to start reading it again. And in fact, because it's raining and I've just baked a whole tray of banana chocolate chip muffins, that's exactly what I'm going to do today. I'm going to curl up in bed with a cup of tea and a muffin, and I'm going to read this book because it made me feel really excited. It made me feel like it was dealing with my feelings of depression was something that was within my control, but also that connecting with other people who also felt this way would lead to bigger, wider change. And that's something that with the Freedom Junkies, I'm super committed to. This is something that's like the motivation behind the project that we want to do, the land project that we want to start, is to create change, to show that there is a different way to live, that we can do better and that we must do better. And to me, this book really showed how important it was, but also how possible it was. I hope you found the episode useful. I really hope you read the book because it was really great, and I'd love to know how you found it, if there was other things in it that stuck out for you that you really liked and enjoyed. And if there's anything that you want to share or bring up, then please check out the Freedom Junkies Facebook page or the group on Facebook. Those are both great places to share ideas or thoughts or opinions about what you've heard or what you've read. And I hope there's something there that you find useful. Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this podcast, head to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. For more information, check out the Freedom Junkies Facebook group and our blog at www.thefreedomjunkies.co.uk. Thanks to Visceral Manifestations for the design, Ryan Swainson for the theme tune, and all of you for listening.